Do you believe in fate? That sometimes God arranges for two strangers to meet so they can save each other? December 15th, 1885. Dawn was breaking over the Elk River in West Virginia, painting the frozen water gold and crimson. The mountains stood silent, wrapped in winter's grip, their peaks lost in morning mist. Caleb Thorne had lived alone in these mountains for 15 years. 38 years old, built like an oak tree, with a thick beard dark as coal and hands scarred from trapping and healing. His cabin sat 2 miles from the river, hidden among pine trees that creaked in the wind. Every morning, same time, he walked down to set rabbit traps along the bank. Routine kept him sane. Routine kept the ghosts away. This morning, something was different. He heard it before he saw it. A splash. Not a fish jumping or a branch falling, something heavier, something human. Caleb looked downstream. There, 30 yards away, a figure was sinking beneath the surface. Dark fabric spreading in the water like ink, arms reaching up once, twice, then disappearing below the ice-cold current. For 15 years, Caleb Thorne had avoided every living soul. For 15 years, he had believed he deserved nothing but solitude. But something in that moment, something he couldn't name, made him move. He threw off his coat, kicked off his boots, and dove. The cold hit him like a fist to the chest. The Elk River in December doesn't forgive. It steals your breath, turns your muscles to stone, makes your heart forget how to beat. But Caleb had survived worse. He had survived war. He had survived guilt. He could survive this. He kicked hard, arms cutting through the water. The current fought him, tried to drag him downstream, but he was stronger. He had always been stronger than he deserved to be. His hand found fabric, hair, a shoulder. He grabbed hold and pulled upward with everything he had. They broke the surface together. The person in his arms was small, light, dressed in black. A woman. Her face was pale as winter sky, lips blue, eyes closed. She wasn't breathing. Caleb dragged her to the bank, his legs burning, his lungs screaming. He laid her on the frozen grass, turned her on her side, pressed down hard on her back. Water poured from her mouth. He pressed again. Again. Come on. Breathe, breathe, damn you, she coughed. A terrible gasping sound. Then another, her eyes fluttered open, unfocused, filled with confusion and terror. Father, she whispered, her voice barely a breath. Forgive me. Caleb leaned back, water dripping from his beard. I'm not a priest, miss, but you're alive. That's what matters. She tried to sit up, failed, collapsed back against the grass. Her whole body was shaking violently. Caleb could see now what she was wearing. A black habit, torn, mud-stained, but unmistakable. A nun's habit. What in God's name was a nun doing drowning in the Elk River before sunrise? He didn't have time to ask. She needed warmth. Now, Caleb lifted her over his shoulder. She weighed nothing, just bone and fear and river water. He carried her up the hillside toward his cabin, moving fast, ignoring the cold that was starting to creep into his own bones. 200 yards through the trees, his lungs burned, his legs shook, but he didn't stop. The cabin door swung open. He laid her on the floor near the fireplace, threw logs onto the dying embers, grabbed every blanket he owned and wrapped them around her. Then he put water on to boil, added ginger root and honey, his hands moving with the practiced efficiency of a man who had tended wounds before. She was still shaking when he pressed the cup to her lips. Drink this, slow. She took a sip, coughed, took another. Her eyes found his face for the first time. Blue-green, like deep water. Eyes that had seen things they shouldn't have seen. My name is Caleb Thorne, he said quietly. You were in the water about 2 minutes. Lucky I wake early. Her voice came out hoarse, broken. Sister Magdalene, people call me Maggie. A pause. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Caleb sat back on his heels, studying her face. Bruises on her neck, shaped like fingerprints. Scratches on her cheeks. This woman hadn't fallen into the river by accident. Why is a nun running through the mountains in the middle of the night? Fear flashed across her face. She turned toward the window as if expecting someone to be standing there. They'll find me, she whispered. They'll come here. Who? Silas Blackwood. The name came out like a curse. He killed a man. I saw him do it. Then he took me. Caleb stood up slowly. He walked to the wall, took down his rifle, checked the chamber. How long ago? 6 months. Her voice cracked. I tried to escape once before. He broke my nose, held me underwater until I blacked out, said I'd never get a second chance. She looked up at him and eyes filling with tears. But tonight, the back door was open. I ran. Caleb moved to the window, looked out at the forest. Nothing yet. But if Blackwood was the man he thought he was, there would be riders. Soon. You're safe here, he said, though he wasn't sure it was true. For now. Maggie pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. She was still shivering, but something else had entered her expression. Not just fear anymore. Something harder. Something that had learned to survive. On the floor beside her, something glinted in the firelight. A small silver crucifix fallen from her habit. Caleb picked it up, turned it over in his rough hands, then held it out to her. You dropped this. Looks important. Maggie's face crumpled. She took the crucifix, pressed it against her chest, and for the first time she let herself cry. Not loud, not theatrical. Just quiet tears running down her face, the kind that come from deep inside where words can't reach. My mother's, she managed to say. Only thing I have left of her. Caleb nodded. He understood loss. He understood the weight of small objects that carried the ghosts of love. He turned back to the fire, started making cornmeal porridge in a cast-iron pot, added honey from a jar on the shelf. His movements were careful, practiced. A man who had lived alone for a long time learns to take care of himself or he dies. You know how to cook? Maggie's voice held a note of surprise. Caleb almost smiled. 15 years alone. Can't rely on prayers to fill your belly. That got a small laugh out of her, just a breath of sound, but it was something. I know what you mean. At the convent, St. Mary's in Charleston, we cooked for 100 people every day. I was a nurse at the charity hospital there. So how did you meet Silas Blackwood? The light went out of her face again. Last June, I was working the night shift, heard a sound in the alley behind the hospital, looked out the window. She paused, her hands trembling around the cup of tea. Saw him shoot a man in the head, just like that. Cold, the man fell. Silas looked up, looked right at me. And then he took you. 3 days later, grabbed me when I was walking home from morning mass. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. 6 months. Every night I prayed today. I begged God to just let me die. Caleb set the pot down. He had heard that tone before. During the war, in the field hospitals, the voices of people who had seen hell and couldn't find their way back. You didn't die, he said quietly. You're here. That means something. Does it? Maggie looked at him with those deep water eyes. Or does it just mean I'm going to die tomorrow instead? Before Caleb could answer, he heard it. Faint, distant, but unmistakable. Dogs barking, horses, men shouting. They were coming. Maggie heard it too. She stood up fast, the blanket falling from her shoulders. I have to go. I can't let them find you with me. Sit down. No, you don't understand. Silas doesn't just kill people who cross him. He destroys them. He'll burn your cabin. He'll make you suffer. Caleb turned to face her. In the growing daylight through the window, she could see him clearly now. Not just a mountain man, but something else. A soldier. Someone who had seen violence and learned to speak its language. I said, sit down. There was something in his voice that made her obey. Not fear, not authority, something deeper, certainty. Caleb checked his rifle again, then pulled out a revolver, checked the cylinder. 6 bullets, enough for what was coming, or enough to fail spectacularly. Hard to say which. How many men does Blackwood have? I don't know. At the farm, there were always at least 5, maybe more. And they'll all come for you? He'll send 3, maybe 4. Maggie's voice was shaking, but she was thinking clearly now. Survival instinct taking over. The dogs will track me to the river. They might think I drowned. But if they find footprints leading here, then they'll come knocking. Caleb looked at her. Can you handle a gun? I'm a nun. That's not what I asked. Maggie stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly she shook her head. No, I can't kill anyone. It's against everything I believe. Then stay behind me and don't make a sound. The barking was getting closer, maybe half a mile away now. 3 riders, Caleb guessed, from the sound of the hooves. Coming fast but not reckless. Men who knew their job. He positioned himself by the window, rifle ready. The minutes crawled past. Outside, the sun had fully risen now, turning the snow gold. Beautiful morning to die, Caleb thought. He had always wondered what morning it would be. Then they appeared through the trees, 3 horses, 3 men. The one in front was young, maybe 22, with cold blue eyes and a rifle across his saddle. The 2 behind him were older, harder looking. Men who had done this work before. The young man dismounted. He walked toward the cabin with the casual confidence of someone who doesn't expect trouble. His hand rested on his gun belt, not threatening yet, but ready. He knocked on the door, 3 sharp raps. Caleb opened it. He left the rifle just inside, out of sight but within reach. "Help you, friend?" The young man smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "Morning, we're looking for someone. A woman ran away from a farm about 5 miles west last night. You seen anyone?" "No." Caleb kept his voice flat. "I live alone, don't see many people." "Mind if we look around?" "Yeah, mine. This is my home. You got a warrant?" The smile disappeared. "We don't need a warrant. We're looking for stolen property." "A woman isn't property. This one is." The young man took a step closer. "She belongs to Silas Blackwood, and Silas wants her back." Caleb felt something cold settle in his chest. Not fear, something older, something he thought he had left behind 15 years ago. "I told you," he said quietly. "I haven't seen anyone. Now get off my land." The young man studied him, really looked at him for the first time. Something changed in his expression. Recognition, then shock. "I know you," he said slowly. "You're Caleb Thorne, sharpshooter, 12th Company, Union Army." Caleb said nothing. "My name is Marcus Cole." The young man's voice had gone hard as iron. "You killed my mother, Shenandoah Valley, 1865. She was carrying water to the wounded. You shot her in the back." The words hit Caleb like bullets. He remembered every terrible detail. A farmhouse, a woman in a gray dress, the confusion of battle, the terrible moment when he realized what he had done. "Yes," Caleb said. "I did. It was a mistake. I've apologized every day since." Marcus's hand went to his gun. "Apologize? You think that brings her back?" "No, it doesn't. Nothing can." Caleb didn't move, didn't reach for his weapon. "But if you shoot me, you'll become the same thing I am. A man who killed someone innocent. Is that what your mother would want?" Marcus's hand trembled on his gun. Behind him, the 2 older riders exchanged glances, uncertain now. And then Maggie stepped out from the back room. She stood in the doorway, still wrapped in the blanket, her black habit visible underneath. Her hair hung loose around her face. In the morning light, she looked like something out of a painting, fragile and unbreakable at the same time. "That's enough," she said quietly. All 4 men turned to look at her. "Marcus Cole," she continued, taking a step forward. "Your mother was Ellen Cole. She came to our hospital 3 times before she died. Cancer. She told me about her son, said you were kind, said the war had made you hard, but underneath, you were still the boy she raised." Marcus stared at her. His gun hand had dropped to his side. "How do you know that?" "Because she told me. In her last days when the pain was bad, she talked about you, about how much she loved you." Maggie's voice was steady now, clear. "And she told me something else. She said she forgave the man who killed her, and she said holding on to hate would only make the world darker." Marcus's face crumpled. He looked suddenly young, just a boy playing at being a man. Tears ran down his cheeks. "She said that?" "She did, and she made me promise that if I ever met you, I would tell you." Maggie took another step forward. She was standing between Caleb and Marcus now, unarmed, unafraid. "Your mother died in peace, Marcus. She died believing in forgiveness. Don't make her death meaningless by becoming a killer for Silas Blackwood." For a long moment, nobody moved. The wind blew through the trees. A crow called somewhere in the distance. The world held its breath. Then Marcus holstered his gun. He wiped his face with his sleeve, turned away so the other men couldn't see him cry. "I didn't see her here," he said, his voice thick. "I'll tell Silas she drowned in the river. Body washed downstream." The 2 older riders looked at each other, then at Marcus. One of them shrugged. "Your call, kid." Marcus mounted his horse without looking back. The 3 riders turned and rode away through the trees. In less than a minute, they were gone, swallowed by the forest. Caleb and Maggie stood in the doorway, watching them disappear. Neither spoke for a long time. Finally, Caleb turned to her. How did you know all that? About his mother? I didn't lie. She really did come to our hospital. She really did talk about him. Maggie's hands were shaking now that the danger had passed. But I didn't know he would be here. I didn't know he was looking for me. I just knew what his mother told me, and I knew he needed to hear it. Caleb looked at this woman, this nun, who had just faced down three armed men with nothing but words and truth. He had been a soldier. He had fought in a war. He had killed men at a distance and up close, but he had never seen courage like this. You did something I couldn't do in 15 years, he said quietly. What? You forgave the person who killed someone you loved. Maggie shook her head. I didn't forgive for Ellen Cole. I can't forgive on her behalf. But I could help her son see the truth. That's different. Maybe. Caleb turned back toward the cabin, but it took more bravery than anything I've ever done. They went back inside. Caleb closed the door, checked the window one more time, then sat down heavily in his chair. The adrenaline was fading now, leaving exhaustion in its wake. Maggie sat by the fire, pulling the blanket around her shoulders. For the first time since he pulled her from the river, she smiled. A real smile, small but genuine. You're good at this, she said. The cabin, the medicine, taking care of people. 15 years of practice. Caleb poured them both coffee from the pot on the stove. You learn or you die. I learned the same thing. At the convent, at the hospital. You take care of people, or what's the point of living? They sat in comfortable silence for a while, drinking coffee, listening to the fire crackle. Outside, the day was getting brighter. Inside, something else was happening. Two broken people, strangers an hour ago, beginning to understand that maybe, just maybe, they could help each other survive. Maggie broke the silence first. Why do you live alone out here? Caleb stared into his coffee cup. Because I don't deserve anything else. What I did during the war, killing that woman, it's not something you come back from. I tried to live in town afterward, couldn't do it. Every face I saw, I wondered if they knew what I was. So I came here. Figure if I keep my distance, I can't hurt anyone else. That's not living. That's hiding. Maybe, but it's safe. Maggie set down her cup. Mr. Thorne, can I tell you something? Go ahead. I spent 6 months praying for death. Every night I begged God to let me die, to end it, to make the pain stop. She looked at him with those deep water eyes, but he didn't. He kept me alive. And tonight, when I jumped in that river, I thought he had finally answered my prayer. But then you pulled me out. You saved me. Why do you think that is? Caleb had no answer. I think, Maggie continued, that God doesn't let us die until we've done what we're meant to do. You've been hiding here for 15 years, thinking you deserve to die, but maybe the reason you're still alive is because you were meant to save me, and maybe I was meant to show you that forgiveness is real. Caleb looked at her for a long moment. Then he stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the mountains he had called home for so long. If that's true, he said quietly, then we've got a problem. Because Silas Blackwood isn't going to stop. Marcus might lie for us today, but Blackwood will send more men, and next time they won't be so easy to convince. I know. So what do we do? Maggie stood up. Despite everything, despite the cold and the fear and the exhaustion, she stood tall. There was steel in her spine that hadn't been there an hour ago. We fight, she said simply. Not with guns, not with violence, but we fight. We find a way to stop him, to help the others he's taken, to make sure no one else suffers what I suffered. Caleb turned to face her. That's not going to be easy. Blackwood is powerful. He has men, money, connections. I don't care. Maggie's voice was steady. I'm not running anymore. I'm done being afraid. If God wanted me dead, I would be dead. But I'm alive. And that means I have work to do. For the first time in 15 years, Caleb Thorne felt something he thought was gone forever. Purpose, not redemption, not yet, but maybe the beginning of it. Maybe the first step on a long road back to being human again. All right, he said, then we fight. Together. Maggie smiled. Together. Outside, the sun climbed higher in the winter sky. The Elk River flowed on, cold and endless, carrying its secrets to the sea. And in a cabin hidden among the pines, two broken souls made a promise that would change everything. They didn't know it yet, but 5 miles away, Silas Blackwood sat in his farmhouse, looking at a sketch of Sister Magdalene's face. He ran his finger across the drawing, then looked at the photograph on his desk. His wife, dead 10 years now. The resemblance was striking, undeniable. Elizabeth, he whispered to the photograph, you've come back to me, and this time I won't let you escape. He called for Marcus Cole. Time to send more men. Time to bring his wife home. The hunt was just beginning, and neither Caleb nor Maggie knew what was truly coming for them, and not just a man, not just a criminal, but something darker, something obsessed, something that would not stop until it had what it wanted, or until someone stopped it forever. The hand of Providence had brought them together. Now they would have to fight like hell to survive what came next. The forest was quiet after Marcus and his men rode away. Too quiet. The kind of silence that settles over the world when violence has just passed but hasn't quite finished its business. Caleb stood at the window, watching the tree line. His rifle rested against the wall within easy reach. Old habits from the war. Always keep your weapon close. Always watch the shadows. Behind him, Maggie sat by the fire, her hands wrapped around a tin cup of coffee. She had stopped shaking, but something in her posture told him the fear hadn't left. It had just moved deeper, where words couldn't reach it. They'll come back, she said quietly. I know. Marcus might lie for us today, but Silas will know. Men like him always know. Caleb turned from the window. In the morning light, he could see her more clearly now. Not just the bruises and the fear, but something else. Strength. The kind that comes from surviving things that should have broken you. Then we don't wait for them to come to us, he said. We move first. Maggie looked up, surprised. What do you mean? I mean running won't work. Hiding won't work. Caleb moved to the table, pulled out a piece of paper and a pencil, started drawing a rough map. Blackwood's farm is about 5 miles west. You said there are other women there, Stittle will have to. Yes, at least 7, maybe more. Her voice cracked. There's a girl, Anna, 14 years old. She's been there 3 months. Caleb's jaw tightened. 14. Same age as his sister had been when she died of fever during the war, before he could save her. Before he learned that some things can't be saved with guns and violence. Then we get them out, he said, all of them. How? It's just you and me. Silas has 10, maybe 15 men, armed. Dangerous. I know someone who can help. Caleb put down the pencil. Ruth Whitaker runs a way station about 5 miles east. She's been feeding me information for years, knows everything that happens in these mountains. Why would she help? Caleb's expression darkened. Because 10 years ago, Silas Blackwood took her daughter, girl named Sarah, 16 years old. Ruth searched for months. By the time she found her, Sarah had drunk poison, couldn't live with what had been done to her. Maggie closed her eyes. God have mercy. Ruth doesn't believe in mercy anymore. She believes in justice, and she's been waiting for someone brave enough to stand against Blackwood. Caleb looked at her. That someone might be you. Me, I'm just a nurse, a nun who couldn't even keep her vows when it mattered. You faced down 3 armed men with nothing but words. You saved both our lives without firing a shot. Caleb's voice was firm. That's not weakness, sister. That's the kind of strength that changes things. Before Maggie could respond, a sound cut through the morning air. Hoofbeats, coming fast from the east. Different direction than Marcus had gone. Caleb grabbed his rifle. Get in the back room, now. But Maggie didn't move. Wait, listen. The hoofbeats slowed, stopped. A woman's voice called out. Caleb Thorne, it's Ruth Whitaker. I'm coming in, so don't shoot me, you stubborn bear. Caleb lowered the rifle, almost smiled. He opened the door. Ruth Whitaker was 55 years old, with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun and eyes that could cut through steel. She wore men's riding clothes, practical and worn, and carried herself like someone who had long ago stopped caring what anyone thought of her. She dismounted, tied her horse, and walked straight into the cabin without waiting for an invitation. Her eyes went immediately to Maggie. So you're the one, Ruth said. The nun Silas has been hunting for 6 months. Maggie stood up slowly. How did you know? I know everything that happens in Greenbrier County. Girl, I knew Silas took you the day after it happened. Knew you tried to escape once and he broke your nose. Knew you jumped in the river last night. Ruth's voice softened slightly. And I know what he's been doing to you. What he does to all of them. Tears filled Maggie's eyes. Then why didn't anyone help? Because everyone's scared. Silas owns the sheriff, owns the judge, owns half the merchants in Charleston. Anyone who stands against him ends up dead or ruined. Ruth poured herself coffee without asking. But that's about to change. She pulled an envelope from her coat, handed it to Caleb. This came by telegraph yesterday, from Deputy Marshal James Crawford in Wheeling. He's been investigating Silas for 2 years. No proof, no witnesses willing to talk. But he's coming here, should arrive in 3 days. Caleb opened the envelope, read quickly. His expression changed. Crawford's a federal marshal. That means he can arrest Silas regardless of what the local law says. If he has evidence, Ruth added, which he doesn't, not yet. Maggie stepped forward. I'll testify. I'll tell him everything. Your word against Silas Blackwood? Ruth shook her head. Won't work. Silas will say you're lying, that you were his employee, left voluntarily. Judge Pierce is in his pocket. You'll be arrested for theft or false testimony before you can blink. Then what do we do? Ruth looked at Caleb. We need to catch him in the act. Crawford says Silas is meeting with a gang from Kentucky on December 22nd. They're bringing more women, selling them. If we can raid the farm that night, catch him with the evidence, Crawford can arrest him under federal trafficking laws. Caleb studied the map he had drawn. That's 7 days from now. A lot can happen in 7 days. Can we trust this marshal? Maggie asked. Crawford's honest. Rare thing these days. But it exists. Ruth sat down heavily, suddenly looking her age. I've been feeding him information for a year. He's the only lawman I trust. But he needs proof, real proof. Bodies, witnesses, documents. Otherwise, Silas walks free and we all end up dead. The three of them sat in silence for a moment, each calculating odds, measuring courage against fear. Finally, Maggie spoke. I need to tell you something. About my brother. Caleb and Ruth both turned to look at her. I have a brother, Father Timothy Brennan. He's a priest. Maggie's voice shook. He's at Blackwood's farm, has been for 2 years. What? Caleb stood up. You never said anything. Because I was ashamed. Because he's working for Silas. The words came out in a rush now, like poison being drained from a wound. Our mother had cancer. The hospital bills were enormous. Timothy borrowed money from Silas to pay for her treatment, but Mother died anyway, and the debt remained. Silas told Timothy he could work it off. Be a chaplain at the farm, tend to the spiritual needs of his workers. Ruth's expression hardened. Spiritual needs. That's what he calls it. Timothy didn't know at first. By the time he realized what Silas was really doing, it was too late. The debt had grown. Silas threatened to destroy him, have him defrocked, arrested for complicity, so Timothy stayed and hated himself every day for it. But he helped you escape, Caleb said. Maggie nodded. He left the back door unlocked, told me to run, but he couldn't come with me. Said if he ran, Silas would hunt us both, and we'd never be free. Better for me to go alone. Your brother sacrificed himself for you, Ruth said quietly. And now he's there alone, knowing Silas will punish him when they realize I'm gone. Maggie looked at them both. We have to save him too. Along with the other women, we have to save all of them. Caleb exchanged a glance with Ruth. The stakes had just gotten higher. Not just a rescue operation, not just bringing down Silas Blackwood, but saving a man who had compromised his soul to pay a debt he couldn't escape. We need more help, Ruth said. More than just us three. I might know someone, Caleb said slowly. Red Sky Walker, Cherokee medicine man, lives about 2 miles north of here. He owes me a favor. The old healer? Ruth raised an eyebrow. He's got to be 65 if he's a day. 65 and tougher than both of us combined. Caleb stood up. He knows the mountains better than anyone. Knows herbs that can put men to sleep or wake them up. And he's no friend of Silas Blackwood. Why not? Because 5 years ago, Silas tried to buy Red Sky's land. When he refused, Silas had 3 men beat him half to death and burn his cabin. Red Sky survived, rebuilt, but he doesn't forget. Maggie looked between them. So we have a federal marshal, a station keeper, a mountain man, and a Cherokee healer against Silas Blackwood and 15 armed men. And a nun, Ruth added with the ghost of a smile. Don't sell yourself short, girl. I can't shoot a gun. Maybe not, But you did something this morning that no man could do. You saved lives with words, with truth. That's a weapon too. Ruth stood up. Come with me to the station. I have clothes you can wear. Food. And I want to hear everything you know about that farm. Every door, every window, every guard rotation. We're going to plan this raid down to the last detail. Maggie looked at Caleb. What about you? I'm going to find Red Sky, see if he'll join us. Caleb checked his rifle, then pulled on his coat. Meet at Ruth's station by sundown. We'll plan this properly. And if Marcus comes back before then, he won't. He bought us time. Maybe a day, maybe two. But he bought it. Caleb paused at the door. Sister Maggie, what you did this morning, helping Marcus see the truth about his mother, that was the bravest thing I've ever witnessed. Don't doubt yourself. We're going to need that courage again before this is over. Maggie nodded, but her hands were shaking again. Courage was easy to talk about, harder to hold on to when the fear came creeping back. Ruth saw it. She walked over, took Maggie's hands in her own calloused ones. Listen to me, girl. I lost my daughter to Silas Blackwood. Lost her because I wasn't brave enough, wasn't strong enough, wasn't fast enough to save her. I've lived with that for 10 years. Every morning I wake up and see her face. Every night I go to sleep hearing her voice calling for me. Tears ran down Ruth's weathered cheeks. But you're alive. You survived. And now you have a choice. Run and hide and let him win, or stand and fight and maybe, just maybe, stop him from destroying anyone else. Your brother is still there. Anna is still there. 7 other women are still there. What are you going to do about it? Maggie straightened her spine, wiped her own tears away. We're going to save them. Damn right we are. They left the cabin together, Ruth and Maggie on horseback heading east, Caleb on foot heading north. The winter sun climbed higher in the sky, turning the snow to gold. In the forest, crows called warnings to each other. A storm was coming, not just weather, something bigger. Caleb found Red Skywalker 2 hours later, in a clearing surrounded by pine trees. The old Cherokee was grinding herbs in a stone bowl, his long white hair pulled back with a leather cord, his weathered face peaceful in concentration. I heard you coming a mile away, Red Sky said without looking up. You walk like a bear, trying to be a rabbit. Despite everything, Caleb smiled. I need your help. I know, the woman from the river, the one who should have died but didn't. Red Sky looked up, his dark eyes sharp. You saved her. Now you want to save the others. How did you know? The crows told me, the wind told me, and my grandson who works at the mill told me that Silas Blackwood's men are searching for a nun who escaped. Put the pieces together. Not hard to see the picture. Red Sky stood up, bones creaking. Also, you have that look, the one you had during the war, the one that says you're about to do something dangerous and probably stupid. We're raiding Blackwood's farm. 7 days from now, Federal Marshal is coming to help. But we need someone who knows the land, knows medicine, knows how to move silent. Red Sky was quiet for a long moment, staring into the trees. Finally, he spoke. In my grandfather's time, a young woman was taken by a great eagle, carried to its nest high in the mountains. Everyone said she was dead, but she was not dead. She watched the eagle, learned its wishes, learned how it flew, how it hunted. And one day when the eagle left to find food, she climbed down the mountain, not to run away, but to come back with the other women of the village. And together they drove the eagle from the mountain so it could never take anyone again. He looked at Caleb. Your nun, she is like that girl. She did not die. She learned. And now she comes back, not just for herself, but for the others. This is the way. This is honorable. So you'll help? I will help. But know this, Caleb Thorne. We cannot win with violence alone. Silas Blackwood has more guns, more men. If we fight his way, we lose. We must fight with wisdom, with patience, with spirit. Red Sky smiled slightly. And yes, maybe with a few herbs that make men sleep very deeply. They shook hands, sealing the agreement. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the forest, they walked together toward Ruth's way station. Somewhere behind them, in the trees, Marcus Cole watched from a distance. He had followed Caleb, listened to the conversation with Red Sky, and now he sat on his horse, torn between duty to Silas and the memory of his mother's words. Forgiveness, she had said. Choose forgiveness. Marcus touched the spot over his heart where his mother's locket hung. Then he turned his horse and rode not back to Silas, but toward a small cabin where he could think, where he could decide who he wanted to be, a man who served evil for money, or a man who honored his mother's memory by doing what was right. The choice was harder than it should have been, but it was his to make. At the way station, Ruth was already preparing. She had pulled out maps, weapons, supplies. Maggie sat at the table, drawing a detailed layout of Blackwood's farm from memory. Every building, every window, every place where women were kept locked away from hope. When Caleb and Red Sky arrived, the planning began in earnest. Not just a raid, not just a rescue, but a careful, calculated operation that would require timing, luck, and more courage than any of them knew they possessed. 7 days, Ruth said, spreading the map out. 7 days to prepare. 7 days before we go to war against the most dangerous man in West Virginia. Maggie looked around the table at these unlikely allies. An old woman driven by grief, a mountain man seeking redemption, a Cherokee healer guided by wisdom, and herself, a nun who no longer knew if God was listening, but who knew she had to try anyway. Then we'd better get started, she said. Outside, the first snow of evening began to fall. Winter in the mountains was beautiful and deadly in equal measure, just like the path they had chosen, just like the fight that was coming. In his farmhouse, Silas Blackwood sat by the fire, holding the photograph of his dead wife, waiting, knowing that Sister Magdalene was out there somewhere, knowing that she would come back or he would bring her back, one way or another. Soon, Elizabeth, he whispered, soon you'll be home where you belong. The hunt continued, the storm was gathering, and 7 days was both a lifetime and no time at all. The next 4 days passed like a fever dream, training, planning, waiting. Ruth's way station became their war room. The main building was sturdy timber, built to withstand mountain winters and the occasional desperate traveler. Now it housed something more dangerous. Hope armed with purpose. December 16th. Dawn came late to the mountains, the sun struggling through heavy clouds that promised more snow. Maggie woke in the small room Ruth had given her, the first real bed she had slept in since June. 6 months of sleeping on a thin mattress in a locked room, always listening for footsteps, always afraid of the door opening. But this morning she woke to silence. Safety, the smell of coffee and bacon drifting up from the kitchen below. She dressed in the clothes Ruth had given her, plain work dress, sturdy boots, a wool coat. Not a nun's habit anymore. That part of her life felt distant now, like something that had happened to a different person. She kept the crucifix, though, her mother's crucifix. Some things you don't let go of, no matter how much you change. Downstairs, Caleb was already at the table, cleaning his rifle with practiced efficiency. His hands moved with the kind of muscle memory that comes from years of repetition. Soldier's hands, killer's hands, healer's hands, all at once. Morning, he said without looking up. Coffee's on the stove. Maggie poured herself a cup, sat across from him. You didn't sleep. Don't sleep much these days. He ran a cloth down the barrel, checking for rust. Ghosts keep me company. I know the feeling. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Outside, Ruth was chopping wood with the steady rhythm of someone who had been doing hard work her whole life. The thunk of the axe hitting wood carried through the morning air like a heartbeat. Caleb, Maggie said quietly, can I ask you something? Go ahead. Why are you really doing this? Helping me, I mean. You could have just let me drown, let the river take me, stayed in your cabin and kept hiding from the world. Caleb set down the rifle, looked at her with those gray eyes that had seen too much. Because 15 years ago, I killed an innocent woman by mistake. And I've spent every day since trying to figure out how to live with that. You think hiding in a cabin is living? It's not. It's just dying slowly. He paused, choosing his words carefully. When I pulled you out of that river, something changed. Not because I saved you, but because you gave me a reason to save myself. Does that make sense? Yes, Maggie said. It makes perfect sense. The door opened. Ruth came in, brushing snow off her shoulders. Red Sky is here, and he brought someone. They all went outside. Red Sky Walker stood in the yard, and next to him was another man. Younger, nervous, familiar. Marcus Cole. Caleb's hand went instinctively to his gun belt. What's he doing here? I came to help, Marcus said quickly. He held up his hands, showing he was unarmed. I know what you're planning. The raid on Blackwood's farm. I want in. Why would we trust you? Ruth's voice was ice. You work for Silas. Worked for Silas. Past tense. Marcus took a deep breath. After I left your cabin, I couldn't stop thinking about what Sister Maggie said. About my mother. About forgiveness. I went home, looked through my mother's things, found letters she wrote before she died. Letters to me. His voice cracked. She wrote that she forgave the soldier who shot her. Wrote that hate was a poison, and she didn't want me drinking it. Said if anything happened to her, I should choose kindness over revenge. He looked at Caleb. I've been choosing wrong for 22 years. Time to change that. Red Sky spoke, his voice calm and certain. I have known this young man since he was a boy. His mother brought him to me when he had fever. Good woman. Kind soul. Her son carries her spirit, even if he has forgotten it. I believe him. Caleb studied Marcus for a long moment. The war had taught him to read men, to see past words into the truth beneath. What he saw in Marcus Cole was genuine. Fear, yes. Uncertainty, yes, but also determination. The kind that comes from finally understanding who you want to be. What can you tell us about the farm? Caleb asked. Marcus's shoulders relaxed slightly. Everything. Guard rotations. How many men Silas keeps on site. Where the women are held. Where Timothy Brennan is locked up. Maggie stepped forward. Timothy is locked up. You said he was chained before. Is he hurt? Not hurt, but Silas knows he helped you escape. Timothy's in the root cellar now, chained to the wall. Silas is keeping him alive as bait. Thinks you might come back for him. He's right, Maggie said firmly. I will. That's exactly what Silas is counting on. Marcus pulled a folded paper from his coat. I drew this last night. Full layout of the property. He spread it on the porch table. The drawing was detailed, careful. Main house, barn, barracks where the guards slept, in a separate building, smaller with barred windows. That's where the women are kept, Marcus said, pointing. 9 of them now. Silas bought 2 more last week from a gang in Kentucky. Anna is still there, the youngest. Maggie felt sick. 9 women. 2 more added while she was safe at Ruth's station. 2 more lives destroyed while she slept in a warm bed. In this, Caleb pointed to a building near the back of the property. Root cellar, built into the hillside. Only 1 door, heavy lock. That's where Timothy is. Ruth leaned over the map. How many guards at night? Usually 5 on patrol, 3 more sleeping in the barracks. Silas keeps 4 dogs loose after midnight. Mean animals. They'll bark at anything. What about Silas himself? Sleeps in the main house, 2nd floor, corner room. Keeps a rifle by the bed and a pistol under his pillow. Doesn't trust anyone. Marcus looked at them. He's paranoid and he's dangerous, but he's not invincible. Just careful. Red Sky traced his finger along the map. Here, this stream runs behind the property, flows down from the mountain. If we follow the water, we can approach from the back, upwind of the dogs. The dogs will still hear us, Ruth pointed out. Red Sky smiled slightly. Unless they are very sleepy, I have herbs. Mix them in meat, throw them over the fence before we arrive. The dogs eat, the dogs sleep. Simple. How long do we have before the Kentucky gang arrives? Caleb asked. December 22nd, 6 days from now. They're bringing 5 more women to sell. That's when Silas will have the most people on the property, but also when he'll be distracted with the transaction. Ruth nodded slowly. And Crawford arrives in 3 days. That gives us time to plan properly. Go over every detail. Make sure we don't get anyone killed. Someone might die anyway, Caleb said quietly. We need to be honest about that. We're going up against armed men who won't hesitate to shoot. This isn't a game. Maggie looked around at the faces gathered on the porch. Ruth, old and weathered but burning with purpose. Red Sky, was and patient. Marcus, young and trying to redeem himself. And Caleb, the broken soldier looking for a way to be whole again. Then we make sure the people who die are the ones who deserve it, she said. Not the innocent, not the victims. We save them, whatever it costs. They spent the rest of the day going over the plan, every detail, every contingency. What if the dogs don't eat the drug meat? What if more guards are on duty than expected? What if Timothy is already dead? That last question hung in the air. unspoken but present. Maggie felt it like a weight on her chest. Her brother, the only family she had left, the man who had sacrificed his freedom to save hers. As the sun began to set, painting the snow orange and gold, Deputy Marshal James Crawford arrived. He rode a gray horse, wore a long coat, and carried himself with the quiet authority of a man who had been enforcing law on the frontier for 20 years. He dismounted, shook hands with Ruth first, then Caleb. "You must be the ones who've been stirring up trouble for Silas Blackwood," he said. His voice was deep, measured. "About time someone did." Ruth gestured to Maggie. "This is Sister Magdalene Brennan, the witness you have been looking for." Crawford looked at Maggie with sharp eyes, not unkind but assessing. "You willing to testify against Blackwood in federal court, knowing what it might cost you?" "Yes," Maggie said without hesitation. "I'll tell everything. What he did to me, what he's doing to the others, all of it." "Good, because testimony alone won't be enough. We need physical evidence, documents, the women themselves as witnesses, and we need to catch him in the act of trafficking." Crawford pulled out a document from his saddlebag. "I have a federal warrant here, authorizes me to raid the property if I have probable cause. What you're describing? That's probable cause." "So we can do this legally," Caleb said. "We can, but legal doesn't mean safe. Blackwood has money, connections. Even after we arrest him, he'll fight, hire lawyers, try to intimidate witnesses." Crawford looked at Maggie again. "You prepared for that? For him to drag your name through the mud? Call you a liar? A whore? That's what his lawyers will do?" Maggie felt the fear rise in her throat, but she swallowed it down. "Let them. I know the truth. The other women know the truth. That's what matters." Crawford nodded approvingly. "You've got spine. Good. We'll need it." They brought him inside, showed him the map Marcus had drawn. Crawford studied it carefully, asking questions, probing for weaknesses in the plan. "Here's what worries me," he said finally, "the timing. If we go in during the transaction with the Kentucky gang, there'll be more armed men on site, more chances for shooting, more chances for the women to get caught in crossfire. But that's also when we have the best evidence," Ruth countered. "Catch him with the gang, with the women, with money changing hands. That's trafficking, that's federal crime. No judge can ignore that." "She's right," Caleb said. "We wait for that night. Go in fast, get the women out, catch Blackwood red-handed." Crawford sighed. "It's risky, but you're right, it's our best shot." He looked around the table. "How many can you muster?" "I have 3 deputies coming with me. That's 4 lawmen. How many do you have?" "Me, Ruth, Red Sky, and Marcus," Caleb said. "Plus Sister Maggie." "I can't fight," Maggie protested. "I don't even know how to shoot." "You don't need to shoot," Crawford said. "You need to be there to identify the women. Help them trust us. Some of them have been captive for years. They won't trust men with guns. They'll trust a woman who survived what they survived." That made sense. Painful sense. 8 of us total then," Crawford continued, "against at least 10 of Blackwood's men, plus however many the Kentucky gang brings. We'll be outnumbered, but we'll have surprise, federal authority, and right on our side." "Right doesn't stop bullets," Ruth said dryly. "No, but careful planning might." Crawford stood up. "We have 6 days. I want to go over this plan every day until we can do it in our sleep. Every person needs to know their role, where to go, what to do, how to signal if something goes wrong." They worked late into the night, assigning positions, planning escape routes, discussing what to do if Timothy was already dead, if the women refused to leave, if Silas set the buildings on fire rather than surrender. By midnight, Maggie's head was spinning with details. She stepped outside for air, stood on the porch looking at the stars. The cold bit through her coat, but it felt clean, honest. The mountains didn't lie, they didn't pretend. They just were. Caleb joined her. "You should get some sleep." "Can't. Every time I close my eyes, I see their faces. The women still there. Anna crying in her cell. My brother chained in the dark." She turned to him. "What if we fail? What if people die and we still don't stop him?" "Then we fail. But we fail trying. That's better than not trying at all." "Is it? Is it better to try and fail than to never try?" Caleb was quiet for a long moment. "During the war, I watched my best friend bleed to death. Took him 3 hours to die. I held his hand the whole time. You know what he said right before he went? Maggie shook her head. He said, "At least we tried to make things right. At least we didn't just let evil win without a fight." Caleb's voice was rough. I think about that a lot, about whether trying matters if you fail. And I think it does, because the trying itself is the point. The willingness to stand up, even when you might fall. That's what separates humans from animals. The choice to do what's right, even when it's hard. Maggie felt tears on her cheeks. I'm scared. But fear keeps you alive. It's the people who aren't scared that die first. She laughed through the tears. That's supposed to make me feel better? It's supposed to make you careful. Smart. We go in there thinking we're invincible. We'll get killed. We go in there scared but determined. We might just survive. Behind them, the door opened. Ruth stood there, backlit by the warm glow of the fireplace. Come inside, both of you. Red Sky made tea. Says it'll help you sleep without nightmares. They went in. Around the table, the unlikely alliance gathered one more time. Crawford, the federal lawman. Ruth, the grieving mother. Red Sky, the wise healer. Marcus, the young man seeking redemption. Caleb, the soldier trying to atone. And Maggie, the survivor who refused to run anymore. 6 days, Crawford said, raising his cup of tea. In 6 days, we take down Silas Blackwood. We free those women. We bring justice to a place that's forgotten what justice looks like. They all raised their cups. No cheers. No bravado, just quiet determination and the knowledge that they were about to step into darkness, hoping to bring out light. Outside, the snow fell harder. The temperature dropped. Winter tightened its grip on the mountains, beautiful and merciless. And 5 miles away, in his farmhouse, Silas Blackwood stared at the picture of Sister Magdalene one of his men had drawn from Marcus's description. She looked like Elizabeth. Same eyes, same defiant tilt to the chin, same beauty that refused to be broken. She'll come back, he told the empty room. They always come back. And when she does, I'll make sure she never leaves again. He touched the photograph of his dead wife, then looked back at the drawing of Maggie. In his twisted mind, they were the same person. Elizabeth reborn, given back to him. A second chance to possess what he had destroyed the first time. The obsession burned in him like fever, and like all fevers, it would either break or consume him entirely. The countdown had begun. 6 days until the raid. 6 days until justice or death. 6 days until Maggie would face the man who had tried to break her and show him that some things, once broken, become stronger at the fractured places. The mountain wind howled. The fire burned low. And in the quiet moments before sleep, each of them wondered if they would survive to see the sun rise on December 23rd. Only time would tell, and time in the mountains moved slow and fast at once. The next 5 days blurred together, dawn to dusk preparations, Caleb teaching Maggie how to move silently through brush, Red Sky mixing compounds, Marcus drawing and redrawing the farm layout from memory, Ruth stockpiling medical supplies, Crawford drilling his deputies on entry tactics. By the night of December 21st, they were as ready as they would ever be. The plan was set, the roles assigned. All that remained was the waiting and the fear. December 22nd, 1885. The day had finally come. The sun never fully rose that morning. Heavy clouds pressed down on the mountains, turning the world gray and cold. Snow had fallen through the night, covering everything in white silence, beautiful and treacherous in equal measure. At Ruth's way station, the team gathered before dawn. No one had slept well. Fear and adrenaline don't make good bedfellows with rest. Crawford checked his rifle for the 3rd time. His 3 deputies, hard men from Wheeling, who had seen frontier justice before, stood ready. They wore no badges today. Badges made good targets. Caleb moved through his preparations with mechanical precision. Gun cleaned and loaded, knife sharpened, extra ammunition in his coat pockets. 15 years might have passed since the war, but the soldier in him remembered how to prepare for battle. Red Sky worked quietly in the corner, mixing his herbs into chunks of raw meat. The sleeping compound he had prepared was potent, strong enough to drop a grown dog in minutes, gentle enough not to kill. The old Cherokee believed in balance. Even enemy dogs didn't deserve cruelty. Marcus stood apart from the others, nervous energy radiating from him like heat. This was his chance at redemption, his chance to honor his mother's memory by doing what was right instead of what was easy. But doubt still gnawed at him. What if Silas discovered his betrayal? What if the other men recognized him and shot him on sight? Ruth noticed his discomfort. She walked over, placed a weathered hand on his shoulder. "You're afraid." "Yes, ma'am." "Good, means you're smart. The fearless ones are usually the first to die." She squeezed his shoulder. "But you're here anyway. That's courage. Your mother would be proud." Marcus's eyes filled with tears. "I hope so." Maggie sat at the table, staring at her hands. Someone had given her a small pistol. She had refused at first, but Crawford insisted. "You don't have to shoot anyone, but if someone tries to hurt you, you defend yourself. Understood?" She had taken the gun. It sat heavy in her coat pocket now, a weight that felt wrong and necessary at once. Caleb sat beside her. "You ready?" "No, but I'm going anyway." "That's all anyone can ask." He paused. "When we get there, you stay behind us. Your job is to get to the women, help them trust us, get them out safely. You are not a soldier. Don't try to be one." "What if I see Silas?" Caleb's expression hardened. "You let me handle Silas. You focus on the women, on Timothy, on the mission. Revenge is poison, Maggie. Don't drink it." She nodded, but inside she wasn't sure if she could keep that promise. 6 months of captivity, 6 months of fear and pain and degradation. The thought of facing Silas Blackwood made her hands shake with something that wasn't entirely fear. Crawford called them all together. "Listen up. We move in 2 groups. Group 1, me and my deputies. We approach from the front. Make noise. Draw attention. That's the distraction." He pointed to Caleb, Ruth, Red Sky, Marcus, and Maggie. "Group 2, you come in from the back, along the stream like we planned. Red Sky, you get those dogs sleeping. Marcus, you get us to the building where the women are held. Caleb and Ruth, you provide cover. Maggie, you talk to the women, get them moving." "What about Timothy?" Maggie asked. "Once the women are secure, Caleb and Marcus go for the root cellar. Get Timothy out, then we all retreat to the rally point in half a mile east. Horses will be waiting." Crawford's face was grim. "This goes wrong, we scatter. Meet back at Ruth's station in 24 hours. Everyone understand?" They all nodded. "One more thing. Silas Blackwood is mine. He resists arrest, he dies, but we take him alive if possible. Federal court needs to see him, needs to make an example." Crawford looked at each of them in turn. "Any questions?" "Yes," Red Sky said quietly. "What about the Kentucky gang? They'll be armed, dangerous. They're criminals, not soldiers. They see federal badges, most of them will run. The ones who don't, we deal with." Crawford pulled out his pocket watch. "It's 4 in the morning. The transaction is supposed to happen at 5. We hit them at 1:15, when they're focused on money and not paying attention to anything else." 1 hour and 15 minutes. They moved out in silence. The snow had stopped, leaving the world crystalline and still. Their breath made white clouds in the frozen air. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, the mountains answering back with their own wild song. Group 1 split off, heading toward the main road. Group 2 followed the stream, moving slowly, carefully. Red Sky led the way, his feet finding purchase on ice-slicked rocks that would have sent younger men tumbling. Maggie stayed close to Caleb. Every step brought her closer to the place she had fled from. Every step made the fear tighten around her ribs like wire. But she kept moving, one foot in front of the other, breathing, praying, not sure if God was listening, but praying anyway. After 30 minutes, Marcus raised his hand. They stopped. Ahead, through the trees, lights glowed. The farm, Blackwood's property. Maggie could see the main house, warm and well lit. The barn, dark and looming. And the smaller building with barred windows. The prison. Her prison. For 6 months. And now she was about to go back inside. Red Sky moved forward alone, silent as smoke. He reached the fence line, pulled out the drugged meat, threw chunks over into the yard. They could hear the dogs stirring, curious. Then the sound of eating. Greedy, hungry sounds. 5 minutes passed. 10. The dogs went quiet. Red Sky returned, nodded. They sleep, but not forever. We have maybe 1 hour before they wake. They climbed the fence one by one, dropped into the yard, moved toward the back of the property, keeping to shadows, staying low. Maggie's heart hammered so hard she thought everyone could hear it. From the front of the farm, a gunshot cracked the silence. Then another. Crawford and his deputies had started the distraction. Shouts erupted from inside the main house. Men running, confusion, exactly what they needed. Marcus led them to the women's building. The door was locked, heavy iron. He pulled out a key he had stolen days ago, hands shaking so badly he could barely fit it in the lock. "Hurry," Ruth whispered. The lock clicked. The door swung open. Inside, darkness. Then movement. Frightened shapes backing away from the door. 9 women ranging from teenage to middle-aged, all wearing rags, all bearing the marks of violence and captivity. Maggie stepped forward. "My name is Sister Magdalene. Some of you know me. I escaped 2 weeks ago. I've come back for you. We're getting you out, now." Silence. Then a small voice from the back. "Sister Maggie?" "Anna, 14 years old, thin as a skeleton, but alive." "Yes, Anna, it's me." Maggie moved deeper into the room. "We have to go. Right now, federal marshals are here. You're safe. But you have to trust me. Can you do that?" The women looked at each other. 6 months, some of them years, of being told they would never escape. Being told no one would help them. Being broken down until hope seemed like a cruel joke. But something in Maggie's voice, in her presence, made them move. One by one they came forward. Anna first, then the others. Ruth appeared in the doorway. "We have to move. Shooting out front is getting heavy." They led the women out into the cold night. 9 souls who had forgotten what freedom felt like. Some were crying, some were silent, and all were terrified. Caleb and Marcus headed toward the root cellar. The heavy door loomed before them, locked with a chain and padlock. Marcus pulled bolt cutters from his pack, worked frantically. The chain snapped. They pulled the door open. Stairs led down into darkness. The stench assaulted them immediately. Unwashed bodies, blood, despair. "Timothy?" Maggie had followed them against orders. "Timothy, are you down there?" A weak voice answered. "Maggie, is that really you?" They descended the stairs. In the corner, chained to the wall, was a man who barely looked human anymore. Gaunt, filthy, beaten. But his eyes were alive. Aware. Father Timothy Brennan. 32 years old, though he looked 60. "We're getting you out," Caleb said, already working on the chains with the bolt cutters. "No," Timothy gasped. "It's a trap. Silas knew you'd come. He's waiting." As if summoned by the words, the cellar door slammed shut above them. They heard the chain being wrapped around the handles, locked in. Then a voice, smooth and cold, called down through the door. "Sister Magdalene, I knew you'd come back to me. You always were predictable." Silas Blackwood. Maggie's blood turned to ice. "The federal marshals are dead," Silas lied, his voice dripping with false confidence. "My men are cleaning up their bodies now. The women you tried to rescue are being rounded up. And you, my dear Elizabeth, you're exactly where I want you, trapped like the rat you are." Caleb tried the door, solid, no way to force it from below. "This is what happens when you run from me." Silas's voice dripped with satisfaction. "This is what happens when you defy me. I'm going to burn this cellar with all of you inside, and then I'm going to tell everyone you died trying to escape. A tragedy, so very sad." They could smell it already. Smoke. He was serious. Marcus looked at Caleb, panic in his eyes. "There's no other way out. We're trapped." Timothy spoke, his voice weak but urgent. "There is another way. Behind the back wall, old smuggler's tunnel from Prohibition days. Silas doesn't know about it. I found it weeks ago." Hope flickered. Caleb moved to the back wall, feeling along the stones. His hand found a gap. He pushed. The wall shifted. "Help me," he said. Together, they pushed against the false wall. It gave way, revealing a narrow tunnel leading into darkness. The smoke was getting thicker. They could hear crackling above. Flames. "Go!" Caleb shouted. "Everyone through, now!" Maggie helped Timothy to his feet. The priest could barely walk, but adrenaline gave him strength. Marcus went first into the tunnel, then the others. Caleb stayed last, making sure everyone was through. They crawled through darkness, blind, gasping, the tunnel so narrow they had to move single file. 30 feet, 50. The air was thick, hard to breathe. Behind them, smoke followed, hungry and relentless. Then light. Marcus had reached the end. The tunnel opened into a gully behind the property, hidden by overgrown brush. They emerged into the night, coughing, gasping, alive. But they weren't safe yet. From the farm, they could hear gunfire, screaming, the sounds of battle still raging. Silas had lied. Crawford was alive and fighting. "Crawford," Ruth gasped. "If he's still alive, we have to help him." They ran toward the sound of fighting. What they found made Maggie's heart sink. Crawford and his deputies had taken cover behind a wagon. They were pinned down by 6 of Silas's men firing from the main house. But they were alive, fighting. The Kentucky gang had fled at the first sign of federal badges, just as Crawford predicted. Cowards when faced with real opposition. Caleb took position behind a water trough, raised his rifle, and fired. One of Silas's men went down. Then another. Ruth fired from behind a fence post. Marcus, finding courage he didn't know he had, picked up a dropped rifle and joined the fight. The tide turned. Silas's men, realizing they were outgunned and outmaneuvered, began to retreat, running for horses, running for their lives. But Silas himself stood on the porch of the main house, rifle in hand, scanning the chaos. His eyes found Maggie. "Elizabeth," he screamed, "you can't leave me! Not again!" He raised the rifle, aimed at her. Timothy, weak and barely able to stand, saw it happening. He stumbled forward, putting himself between the gun and his sister. "No!" Maggie screamed. The rifle fired. Timothy jerked backward, a red stain blooming across his chest. He fell into Maggie's arms. Caleb's rifle cracked. Silas dropped, clutching his shoulder, the rifle falling from his hands. Crawford and his deputies rushed the porch, weapons drawn. "Silas Blackwood, you're under arrest by federal authority." But Maggie didn't see any of it. She was on her knees in the snow, holding her brother, watching the light fade from his eyes. "Maggie," Timothy whispered, "forgive me. Please, tell me you forgive me." Tears poured down her face. "There's nothing to forgive. You saved me. You've always saved me." "Mama's cross," he gasped. "I kept it safe for you." He pulled the silver crucifix from around his neck, pressed it into her hand. The same crucifix their mother had worn, the one Maggie thought she had lost. "You're going to be okay," Maggie sobbed. "You're going to live. We'll get you to a doctor." But Timothy smiled, a peaceful smile. "No, sister, my work is done. I paid my debt, not to Silas, to go, to our mother, to you." His breath rattled. "Live well, live for both of us." And then he was gone. The light left his eyes. His body went still. Maggie held him, rocking back and forth, keening with grief that had no words. Around her, the battle ended. Silas Blackwood, wounded and defeated, was dragged away in chains. His men were either dead, captured, or fled into the mountains. The 9 women stood together, freed but uncertain, watching the nun cry over her brother's body. Anna approached slowly. She knelt beside Maggie, put a small hand on her shoulder. "He saved you, just like you saved us." Maggie looked up at the girl, 14 years old, still alive, still capable of compassion despite everything. "Yes," Maggie whispered. "He did." Dawn was breaking over the mountains. The farmhouse burned, flames reaching toward the gray sky. But the women were free. Justice, bloody and hard won, had come to Greenbrier County. Crawford walked over, removed his hat. "I'm sorry for your loss, sister." Maggie stood slowly, still holding the crucifix. His name was Timothy Brennan. He was a good man who made one mistake and spent 2 years paying for it. Remember him that way. "I will." They buried Timothy that morning in the small cemetery behind the church in Charleston. 9 women stood as witnesses. A federal marshal, a mountain man, a Cherokee healer, an old woman with a heart full of grief, and a young man who had chosen redemption over revenge. Father Timothy Brennan, age 32, died saving his sister, died doing what was right. The priest who conducted the service said that sacrifice was the highest form of love. Maggie believed him, but the story wasn't over yet. Justice still had business to attend to, and healing takes longer than fighting. The hardest part was just beginning. January 1886, Charleston, West Virginia. The courthouse stood on Main Street, 3 stories of red brick and white columns, built to look impressive and intimidating in equal measure. Today, it was packed, standing room only. Everyone in Greenbrier County wanted to see Silas Blackwood brought to justice, or see him walk free, because money talked. And Silas Blackwood, even from a jail cell, had plenty of money. Maggie sat in the front row wearing a simple black dress, not a nun's habit anymore. She had made her choice. She would serve God, but not behind convent walls. Not after everything she had seen, everything she had survived. The crucifix hung around her neck, her mother's, Timothy's, now hers again. A reminder of love and sacrifice. Beside her sat Anna, the 14-year-old girl who had somehow found the strength to survive 3 months of captivity. The other 8 women sat in rows behind them, all dressed simply, all carrying themselves with a dignity that captivity hadn't destroyed. Ruth Whitaker sat with them, a fierce guardian. Red Skywalker was there, quiet and observant. Marcus Cole sat near the back, still uncertain of his place but determined to see it through. And Caleb Thorne stood against the wall, arms crossed, watching everything with the careful eyes of a man who had learned not to trust easy victories. Crawford and his deputies were there in full uniform now, federal authority on display. They had transported Silas from the county jail, shackled hand and foot and under heavy guard. When the door opened and Silas Blackwood entered, the courtroom went silent. He looked different than Maggie remembered, smaller somehow. The gunshot wound to his shoulder had healed, but he moved stiffly. His expensive suit couldn't hide the fact that he was a prisoner now, powerless. But his eyes were the same, cold, calculating. And when they found Maggie, they burned with an obsession that prison bars hadn't diminished. He smiled at her, a terrible, possessive smile, as if he still owned her, as if none of this mattered because eventually she would come back to him. Maggie met his eyes and didn't look away. She had run from him once. She had feared him, but not anymore. Fear was a choice, and she chose differently now. The judge entered. Harlan Pierce, 58 years old, known throughout the county as Silas's man. Everyone knew he had been bought years ago. The question was whether he would stay bought or whether his conscience still existed somewhere beneath the corruption. "All rise," the bailiff called. They stood. Judge Pierce took his seat, surveyed the courtroom with weary eyes. He looked older than his years, the weight of compromise showing in every line of his face. "Be seated," he said. "We are here today for the preliminary hearing of Silas Blackwood, charged with multiple counts of kidnapping, human trafficking, assault, and murder under federal statute. How does the defendant plead?" Silas's lawyer stood, a slick man from New York, expensive suit, confident smile, the kind of lawyer money could buy. "Not guilty on all counts, Your Honor. Furthermore, we intend to demonstrate that these charges are based entirely on false testimony from individuals with questionable character and motivation." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Crawford stood. "Your Honor, the federal government has substantial evidence. 9 witnesses, physical evidence from the raid, and testimony from Sister Magdalene Brennan, who was held captive for 6 months." The lawyer smiled. "Sister Magdalene, or should I say the woman who claims to be a nun, but who lived for 6 months as Mr. Blackwood's employee, performing services of an intimate nature, before attempting to extort money from him by crying assault when her advances were rejected." The courtroom erupted. Maggie felt like she had been struck. The words hit her harder than any physical blow. Judge Pierce banged his gavel. "Order! Order in this court!" But the damage was done. The lawyer had planted the seed, turned victim into villain, made captivity sound like employment, made rape sound like romance gone wrong. Maggie's hands shook. She wanted to stand up, to scream the truth, but Ruth grabbed her hand, squeezed hard. "Not yet," the old woman whispered. "Let them play their cards, then we play ours." The lawyer continued, smooth as oil. "Furthermore, Your Honor, the so-called rescue was actually a violent attack on Mr. Recluse. Blackwood's property by vigilantes, resulting in the death of Father Timothy Brennan, who was actually the ringleader of a blackmail scheme targeting my client. The federal marshals were duped into participating in what was essentially a criminal conspiracy." Crawford's face went red. "That's a lie and you know it." "Marshal Crawford," Judge Pierce warned, "control yourself." The hearing continued, witness after witness. The lawyer twisted everything. The 9 women were called prostitutes who had worked willingly. Anna, at 14, was called a runaway who had lied about her age. Ruth was called a bitter old woman seeking revenge for a daughter who had committed suicide rather than live with her failures. It was masterful, terrible and masterful, taking truth and bending it until it looked like lies, taking pain and making it sound like performance. Maggie watched Judge Pierce's face, saw him nodding along, saw him believing or pretending to believe, because that was easier than doing what was right. When it came time for Maggie to testify, she walked to the stand on shaking legs, placed her hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth. The lawyer circled like a shark. Miss Brennan, or do you prefer sister, though I understand you're no longer affiliated with any religious order. I prefer Maggie, she said quietly. Maggie, you claim Mr. Blackwood kidnapped you in June of last year. Is that correct? Yes. And yet you never escaped, never called for help, never sought assistance from authorities? For 6 months. Why is that? Because I was locked in a room, because he threatened to kill me if I tried, because he broke my nose the first time I resisted and held me underwater until I passed out. Or perhaps because you were there willingly, as his companion, until he refused to leave his wife's memory behind and make you his official mistress. Then you became angry and vindictive. That's not true, isn't it? Isn't it true that you seduced my client, promising him comfort after his wife's death, then demanded money when he wouldn't marry you? No, he kidnapped me. He raped me. He kept me prisoner. The lawyer's voice dripped with false sympathy. These are serious accusations, but all we have is your word. The word of a woman who abandoned her religious vows, who lived in sin for 6 months, who now seeks to destroy a pillar of the community out of spite. Maggie felt tears streaming down her face. This was worse than captivity. This was having her truth stolen, having her pain turned into entertainment, having her survival questioned as if she had done something wrong by not dying. The lawyer turned to the judge. Your Honor, I move to dismiss all charges. There is no credible evidence, only the testimony of biased witnesses and a woman scorned. Judge Pierce looked tired, old, ready to do what he had been paid to do. I'll take the motion under advisement. Maggie stepped down from the stand, feeling like she was drowning again, like the river was closing over her head, like all the fighting, all the courage had been for nothing. But then Anna stood up, 14 years old, thin as a rail, wearing a dress Ruth had made for her, looking every bit the child she still was. Your Honor, Anna's voice was small but steady. May I speak? The lawyer objected. This child is not a credentialed witness. This child is a human being, Crawford shot back, and she has a right to be heard. Judge Pierce hesitated, then nodded. Approach the bench, young lady. Anna walked forward. Every eye in the courtroom followed her. She stood before the judge, looked up at him with eyes that had seen too much. What's your name, child? The judge asked, his voice softer than it had been all day. Anna Weber, sir. I'm 14 years old. Mr. Blackwood took me when I was 13, said I could work in his kitchen, but that was a lie. You don't have to do this, the judge said. Yes, I do. Anna's voice grew stronger. Because if I don't, he wins, and all of us who didn't die will have survived for nothing. She turned to face the courtroom. Slowly, deliberately, she unbuttoned the top of her dress, pulled it down to her shoulders. The courtroom gasped. Her back was covered in scars, whip marks, burns, the unmistakable evidence of sustained torture. He did this, Anna said. When I cried, when I said no, when I begged to go home. She pointed at Silas. That man did this, and he did worse. Things I can't say in court. Things I'll carry for the rest of my life. She pulled her dress back up, buttoned it with shaking hands. Sister Maggie saved me. She gave me medicine when I was sick. She told me stories to help me sleep. She protected me from the worst of it. And when she escaped, I prayed she would come back, because she was the only kindness I knew in that place. Anna walked closer to the judge. You want to let him go? You want to say we're all liars? Then look at my back. Look at the other women. We all have scars. We all have stories. And if you don't believe us, then you're saying that our pain doesn't matter, that children don't matter, that truth doesn't matter. The courtroom was utterly silent. Anna turned to the other women. One by one they stood, and one by one they showed their scars, arms, backs, legs, necks. The physical evidence of what Silas Blackwood had done. 9 women, 9 bodies marked by violence. 9 souls who had survived hell and were now demanding to be heard. The lawyer tried to object. Your Honor, this is theatrics, not evidence. But Judge Pierce held up his hand. His face had changed. Something had broken through the corruption. Maybe conscience. Maybe just the weight of undeniable truth. Sit down, counselor, he said quietly. He looked at the women, really looked at them, not as problems to be dismissed or inconveniences to be ignored, but as human beings who had suffered. Then he looked at Silas Blackwood. Silas stared back, no longer smiling. For the first time, fear showed in his eyes. Mr. Blackwood, Judge Pierce said, his voice heavy, I have spent 20 years on this bench, 20 years making compromises, telling myself that pragmatism was wisdom, that looking the other way was necessary for the greater good. He paused. I was wrong, and I'm done being wrong. He turned to the bailiff. Deny the motion to dismiss. All charges stand. Furthermore, I'm transferring this case to federal jurisdiction. Marshal Crawford, you have full authority to transport the defendant to Wheeling for trial. The courtroom erupted in noise. The lawyer shouted objections. Silas Blackwood lunged toward Maggie, screaming her name, or rather, screaming Elizabeth, over and over until the deputies wrestled him to the ground. You can't leave me, he screamed. You're mine. You'll always be mine. But Maggie stood tall, surrounded by the women she had helped save, and said nothing. Because he was wrong. She wasn't his. She never had been. And now, finally, the world knew it. Crawford and his men dragged Silas from the courtroom, still screaming, still obsessed, still unable to understand that his control had ended. Judge Pierce banged his gavel one last time. This court is adjourned. As people filed out, the judge called to Maggie. Sister Brennan, a word. She approached the bench cautiously. I want you to know, Judge Pierce said quietly, that I'm ashamed. I knew what Silas was doing. Not the details, but enough. And I did nothing. Because he paid me. Because I was afraid. Because I was weak. He looked at her with red-rimmed eyes. Your brother died doing the right thing. I've spent years doing the wrong thing and calling it wisdom. If there's any way I can make amends. Maggie interrupted him gently. There is. Stay honest. Starting now, for the rest of your time on the bench. That's how you make amends. He nodded. I will. I swear it. Outside the courthouse, snow was falling again, soft and clean. The women gathered on the steps, uncertain what came next. They were free. Legally free. But freedom without direction is just another kind of lost. Ruth stepped forward. I have room at my station. Not for everyone, but for some. Until you figure out where you want to go. Red Sky spoke up. The Cherokee Nation has resources for those who have been harmed. I can make introductions. Crawford added, federal government has a victims fund. It's not much, but it'll help you start over. But it was Caleb who made the offer that changed everything. He stood beside Maggie, cleared his throat awkwardly. I have land, 15 acres, good soil, clean water. I've been alone there for 15 years, but I'm thinking it's time for that to change. He looked at Maggie. What if we built something there? A place where women who've been through what you've been through can heal, learn skills, find their feet again. A home. Maggie stared at him. You'd do that? We'd do that, together, if you want. She thought of Timothy, of his sacrifice, of his last word. Live well, live for both of us. St. Timothy House, she said softly. We'll call it St. Timothy House, in memory of my brother. Caleb smiled. St. Timothy House it is. Anna grabbed Maggie's hand. Can I help? I want to help other girls, so they don't have to be as scared as I was. Yes, Maggie said, pulling the girl into a hug. Yes, you can help. One by one, the women agreed, not all of them. Some wanted to go home to families, some wanted to start fresh somewhere far away. But 5 of them chose to stay, to help build this new thing, this sanctuary. Marcus approached hesitantly. I'd like to help too, if you'll have me. I'm good with carpentry, building. I could help construct the house. Ruth studied him. You sure about this, boy? It's a lot of work for no pay. I'm sure I need to do something good. Need to honor my mother's memory properly. This feels right. Caleb extended his hand. Marcus shook it. 2 men, once enemies, now building something together. As they stood there in the falling snow, making plans, sharing hope, Maggie felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Peace, not the absence of pain, not the erasure of memory, but the quiet certainty that she was exactly where she was supposed to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do. The trial would continue in Wheeling. Silas Blackwood would face federal justice, but that was someone else's work now. Her work was here, building, healing, helping others find the strength she had found. Timothy's crucifix gleamed against her dress. She touched it, whispered a prayer, not asking for anything, just saying thank you for survival, for friendship, for second chances and new beginnings. The snow fell heavier. The women headed toward Ruth's wagons, ready to begin the journey to their new home, their new life. And as Maggie climbed into the wagon beside Anna, she looked back at the courthouse one last time. Justice had been served. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough. Enough to matter, enough to make a difference. The rest was up to them now, the living, the survivors, the ones who chose to turn pain into purpose. St. Timothy House would rise from these mountains, and with it, hope. The kind that doesn't die, the kind that grows stronger every time someone chooses to stand up instead of stay down. The wagon rolled forward, toward the mountains, toward home. And behind them, the courthouse stood silent, its work done for now, waiting for the next battle between justice and corruption. But that was tomorrow's fight. Today belonged to the survivors, and they had won. Summer 1886. 6 months had passed since the trial. The mountains had shed their winter coat, trading white for green. Wildflowers bloomed in meadows that had been frozen solid just months before. The Elk River ran clear and cold, singing its endless song to anyone willing to listen. And on 15 acres of good land, nestled between two hills, St. Timothy House stood tall. Not grand, not fancy, but solid, real, built by hands that knew hard work and hearts that understood second chances. The main building was 2 stories, timber and stone, with wide windows that let in light and hope in equal measure. A smaller building beside it served as a classroom. Behind that, a garden where vegetables grew in neat rows, tended by women who were learning that growth takes time but is worth the wait. 15 women lived here now, the original 9 from Blackwood's farm, plus 6 more who had found their way here through word of mouth, through Crawford's network, through the simple fact that hope spreads when you give it room to breathe. Anna Weber, now 15, had become something of a teacher. She worked with the younger girls, teaching them to read and write. On Sundays, she led prayers, not from obligation, but from a faith that had somehow survived captivity. Faith tempered by fire, but not destroyed by it. Ruth Whitaker had essentially moved in, claiming she was too old to manage the way station alone anymore. Nobody believed that excuse. The truth was, she had found purpose here, found a way to honor her daughter's memory by protecting other daughters, by being the fierce guardian she wished she could have been 10 years ago. Red Skywalker visited twice a week, bringing herbs and wisdom. He taught the women about medicine plants, about listening to the land, about healing that went deeper than physical wounds. Some nights he told stories from his grandfather's time, stories about survival and resilience, stories that these women understood in their bones. Marcus Cole had proven himself indispensable. He had built the classroom building almost single-handedly. Now he was working on a third structure, a workshop where women could learn trades, carpentry, metalwork, skills that could carry them into independent lives when they were ready. He had also married, quietly, without fuss. A woman named Clara, one of the 9 rescued from Blackwood's farm. They had a small cabin on the edge of the property. Clara was expecting their first child in the fall, new life coming into the world, the best kind of redemption. But the heart of St. Timothy House, the center that held everything together, was the unlikely partnership between Maggie Brennan and Caleb Thorne. They worked side by side every day, not as husband and wife. That line they had never crossed, and both seemed content with that boundary. Maggie had left the convent, but some vows ran deeper than institution, and Caleb understood that, respected it. Instead, they were partners in the truest sense, co-builders of something bigger than themselves. She handled the teaching, the counseling, the emotional healing. He handled the practical matters, security, supplies, making sure the place ran smoothly. And slowly, over months of working together, both of them healed in ways they hadn't expected. Caleb's nightmares came less frequently now. The ghost that had haunted him for 15 years didn't disappear, but they grew quieter, less demanding, as if they recognized that he was finally doing the work of atonement, not just hiding from guilt. And Maggie discovered that healing wasn't a destination but a journey. Some days were hard. Some nights she still woke up gasping, feeling phantom hands around her throat. But those moments grew further apart. And when they came, she was surrounded by women who understood, who didn't judge, who simply sat with her until the fear passed. On a Tuesday morning in July, Maggie stood on the porch of the main house, watching the women work in the garden. The sun was warm on her face. The air smelled of earth and growth. Caleb came up beside her, 2 cups of coffee in his hands. He gave her one without speaking. They had learned the language of comfortable silence. "Crawford sent word," Caleb said after a moment. "The trial in Wheeling is over." Maggie's hand tightened on the coffee cup. "And?" "Guilty on all counts. 25 years to life in federal prison. No possibility of parole." She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "It's really over." "It's over." They stood in silence for a while. Then Maggie asked the question that had been haunting her. "Do you think he'll ever understand what he did, the pain he caused?" Caleb considered. "I don't know. Some men break when they face what they've done. Some men just get angrier. Silas struck me as the angry type. I almost feel sorry for him. Almost. That's because you have a good part. But don't waste too much sympathy, dang. He made his choices. Now he lives with them." Anna came running up the path, breathless. "Miss Maggie, someone's here to see you. A woman says she heard about the house." Maggie and Caleb exchanged glances. This happened more often now. Women finding their way here. Some by referral from Crawford or other lawmen. Some just by rumor. The story of St. Timothy House had spread. A place where broken things could be mended. Where lost souls could find direction. They walked to the front gate. A young woman stood there, maybe 19, holding a small bundle. Her face was bruised, her clothes torn. Her eyes held the look Maggie knew too well. The look of someone who had survived something terrible and wasn't sure if surviving was worth it. "My name is Sarah," the young woman said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I walked for 3 days to get here. They said this place helps women like me." Maggie stepped forward, smiled gently. "They said right. Welcome to St. Timothy House. You're safe now." Sarah's face crumpled. She fell to her knees, sobbing. The bundle in her arms turned out to be a baby, maybe 3 months old. The child looked up at them with huge eyes, too quiet for an infant, already learning that silence was safer than crying. Maggie knelt beside Sarah, didn't touch her yet, knowing that touch could feel threatening. "What's your baby's name?" "Hope," Sarah whispered. "I named her Hope because it was all I had left." "That's a beautiful name, and you chose well coming here. We're going to help you, both of you." Ruth appeared with blankets. Anna brought water and bread. Other women from the house came out, not crowding, just being present. A community of survivors welcoming one more. They helped Sarah inside, got her cleaned up, fed her, put her and baby Hope in a small room on the 2nd floor with a window that looked out at the mountains. Let her rest. Later that afternoon, Maggie sat with Sarah, listened to her story. It was a familiar story by now. A man who seemed kind. Promises of marriage. Then the truth revealed. Violence. Captivity. A baby conceived in horror but loved anyway because love is strange and doesn't follow rules. "I thought about leaving her," Sarah admitted, tears streaming. "Right after she was born, I thought maybe she'd be better off without me, without the stain of what happened." "But you didn't leave her," Maggie said. "No, because when I looked at her face, I saw a possibility. I saw someone who didn't have to be defined by how she came into the world. And I thought if she doesn't have to be defined by it, maybe I don't either." Maggie took Sarah's hand. "You're right. You don't. What happened to you was evil. But you're not evil, and neither is Hope. You're both survivors, and survivors are the strongest people I know." That evening, after Sarah and Hope were settled, Maggie walked down to the river. The same river she had nearly died in 6 months ago. The same river that had led her to Caleb, to this life, to this purpose. She stood at the water's edge, watching the current flow past, always moving, never stopping, like time, like healing. Footsteps behind her. She didn't need to turn around to know it was Caleb. "Thinking?" he asked. "Always. Too much, probably." "Want to share?" She smiled. "I was thinking about Timothy, about what he said before he died. Live well, live for both of us. She looked at the house on the hill, light glowing in the windows. Do you think he'd be proud of what we've built here? I know he would be. How can you be sure? Because this place exists for one reason: to take pain and turn it into purpose, to take suffering and transform it into sanctuary. That's what your brother did with his last breath, turned his mistake into meaning. This house is just the continuation of that choice. Maggie nodded, feeling tears on her cheeks. Good tears this time, the kind that come from gratitude, not grief. I was so angry when he died, she said. Angry at Silas, angry at God, angry at the world for being so cruel. And now? No, I understand that anger is just love with nowhere to go. Timothy loved me. That love made him sacrifice himself. And that sacrifice made all of this possible. She gestured at the house. 15 women have a home because my brother chose to be brave for 30 seconds. How many more will find their way here? How many lives will change because he changed his? Ripples, Caleb said quietly. One choice, one moment, and the ripples spread out forever. They stood in silence as the sun began to set, painting the sky orange and gold. In the distance, they could hear laughter from the house. Someone was teaching the children a song. Someone else was preparing dinner. The sounds of normal life. The kind of normal these women had thought they'd never have again. Caleb, Maggie said, can I ask you something? Always. Are you happy? He thought about it, really thought about it. I don't know if happy is the right word, but I'm at peace for the first time in 15 years. I don't wake up wishing I was dead. I wake up wanting to see what the day brings, wanting to help, wanting to build. That's better than happy. That's purpose. That's what I feel too, like I finally understand why I survived. Not just the river, but everything before it. All the pain, all the fear. It was preparing me for this, for helping others survive. A bell rang from the house. Dinner time. They started walking back side by side, their shadows long in the fading light. At the porch, Maggie paused. Thank you, Caleb, for saving my life that morning, for everything since. Thank you for saving mine. I was drowning long before you hit that river. You just couldn't see the water I was drowning in. They went inside together. The dining room was full. 15 women, 5 children, plus Ruth, Red Sky, Marcus, and Clara. 24 souls gathered around tables that Marcus had built, eating food grown in their own garden, safe in a home that existed because people chose to stand up instead of stay down. Grace was said. Anna led it, her young voice clear and certain. For this food, for this home, for this family we have chosen, we give thanks, and we remember those who made it possible. Timothy Brennan, who gave his life, the women who found courage to testify, and everyone who believes that healing is possible. Amen. Amen, they echoed. Dinner was simple, stew and bread, but it tasted like victory, like freedom, like the future. After dinner, as the women cleaned up and prepared for bed, Maggie went to her room, small but comfortable. A bed, a desk, a window with a view of the mountains. She lit a candle, pulled out paper and pen. She had been writing letters, documenting what happened. Not for a book or for fame, but for history, so that someday people would know what these women survived, what they built, what they became. She wrote, July 15th, 1886. Today, a young woman named Sarah arrived with her baby, Hope. She walked for 3 days to find us. That's what St. Timothy House has become in just 6 months. A beacon, a place where women know they can find safety, compassion, and a chance to rebuild. We are not perfect here. We have hard days. Some women carry trauma so deep that healing feels impossible. But we try. We wake up every morning and choose to try again. My brother once told me that redemption isn't a destination. It's a direction. You point yourself toward the light and keep walking, even when the path is dark, even when you stumble. St. Timothy House is that direction made manifest. Every woman here is walking toward light, and together we make the journey easier. Together, we become stronger than we ever could alone. If you're reading this someday, in some distant future, know this: survival is not enough. We are called to more than just survival. We are called to live, to help others live, to turn our pain into purpose and our trauma into transformation. That is the legacy of Timothy Brennan. That is the promise of St. Timothy House. That is the hope we offer to anyone who finds their way to our door. You are not broken. You are breaking through. And on the other side of that breaking, there is life, real life, worth living. She set down the pen, blew out the candle. Through the window, the stars burned bright in the mountain sky. Constant, eternal, like hope itself. In the years that followed, St. Timothy House would grow. More buildings, more women, more children born into safety instead of captivity. It would become a model, copied by others across the country. The story of what happened in West Virginia would spread, inspiring others to stand up against injustice. Caleb Thorne would live another 30 years, dying peacefully in his sleep at 68, surrounded by women who called him father even though he had fathered none of them. His last words were simple: "I lived well, no regrets." Maggie Brennan would run St. Timothy House until she was 70, helping hundreds of women find their way back to themselves. She never married, never returned to the convent, but everyone who knew her said she was the holiest person they had ever met. Not because she followed rules, but because she embodied love. Anna Weber would become a teacher, then a principal, then an advocate for children's rights. She would testify before Congress, write books, change laws, and she would always say that her life began the day Sister Maggie told her she was worth saving. Ruth Whitaker lived to be 85, fierce and formidable to the end. She died in her sleep in 1915 at St. Timothy House, in the room she had occupied for nearly 30 years, surrounded by the closest thing to family she had known since losing her daughter. Red Skywalker returned to his ancestors at the age of 90, his last words a blessing over St. Timothy House in the language of his people. The women buried him in the small cemetery on the property next to Timothy Brennan because he had said once that they were brothers in spirit, if not in blood. Marcus Cole and Clara raised 6 children. All of them learned their father's carpentry skills. All of them learned their mother's compassion. And all of them grew up knowing that their parents had chosen goodness over evil, even when evil was easier. As for Silas Blackwood, he died in prison after 11 years, still muttering about Elizabeth, still convinced that Maggie would come back to him. He was buried in an unmarked grave. No one attended his funeral. His farm was torn down, the land sold, the money given to victims of trafficking. Some stories end with revenge. Some end with romance. This one ended with something quieter but more lasting. It ended with healing, with purpose, with the stubborn, defiant choice to build something good from the wreckage of something evil. St. Timothy House still stands today, over 130 years later. The original buildings have been replaced, modernized, but the mission remains the same. A sanctuary for those who need sanctuary, a home for those who have lost their way. And in the small cemetery behind the main building, 2 headstones stand side by side. One reads, Timothy Brennan, 1854 to 1885. He gave his life so others might live. The other, Magdalene Brennan, 1859 to 1929. She lived her life so others might heal. Between them, a simple stone marker for all the survivors, past, present, and future. You are not broken. You are breaking through. The mountains endure. The river flows. And hope, stubborn and resilient as wildflowers pushing through stone, continues to grow in the places where darkness once ruled. That is the legacy of mercy. That is the power of choosing to stand when everything tells you to fall. That is the story of St. Timothy House, and it is far from over. Because somewhere tonight, a woman is walking towards safety. A child is learning that kindness exists. A survivor is choosing to live instead of merely exist. And when they arrive at the door, tired and afraid and wondering if they deserve help, someone will be there to say the words that change everything. Welcome home. You're safe now, and your story is just beginning. The end is just another beginning. Always has been, always will be.